Hello, hello, hello. We are live. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. So, we are here with BeWELL Psychotherapy and some of our amazing clinicians. We are here because it is Minority Mental Health Month. So, I want to start by saying that mental health conditions do not discriminate. They do not discriminate based on race, color, gender, or identity. However, anyone who experiences any type of mental health condition can have a hard time accessing services. So that's why this is so important. This month was founded back in 2008. And so tonight is going to really be about education and awareness. So I want all of these amazing clinicians to introduce themselves. These women have been in the trenches doing therapy throughout COVID, helping people heal. And so I'm going to go around and allow them to introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about themselves. So we are going to start with Teanika Chamberlain.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Teanika Chamberlain. I am a licensed clinical social worker, and my specialty is depression and issues with self-esteem and confidence. I would identify as an African-American female.
Okay. Victoria?
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Victoria Rodriguez. I'm a licensed social worker as well. I specialize in anxiety, working with BIPOC populations, and leadership development in business coaching kind of stuff on the back of that. I identify as Latinx. I'm Mexican-American and Puerto Rican.
And Suhailey?
Hello, good evening. My name is Suhailey Núñez. I am a licensed mental health counselor. I am Dominican, or that's where my family's from. I identify as Latina or Afro-Latina. I like working with a lot of young emerging adults, so I specialize in anxiety and adjustment or transitional periods in life, whether it's college, work, relationships, identity issues.
And Brittany?
Good evening, everyone. I'm so thrilled to be here with you all. My name is Brittany Lynch. I am also a licensed clinical social worker. I am also a professor at
Brittany, you're breaking up a little bit.
Am I?
Yeah, if you could go a little louder. Yeah.
Okay. So my specialties include depression, life transitions, and relationship difficulties, including one's relationship with themselves. I also am a registered yoga teacher, and so my office is bringing on
Thank you, Brittany. And last but certainly not least, Divya.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Divya Robin. I'm a mental health counselor, and I specialize in anxiety, OCD, and mood disorders. I'm so excited to be here with all of you today. My pronouns are she, her, and I identify as South Asian.
Okay. So I think we're going to jump right in. So I guess the first question is, why is there a need for Minority Mental Health Month? I guess I will start with Suhailey, and then we'll kind of go around and you guys just jump on in, okay?
Sure. So why is there a need for Minority Mental Health Awareness Month? One, I guess just to start off, I noticed that at times I still find myself having to defend what I do and the field of mental health as a whole, even to my family members, because a lot of them don't understand and they weren't raised to understand or accept therapy as something that's normal, checking your mental health as something that's normal, right? And that's what makes it so ironic, is that the people I entered this career to help are the same people that may hesitate to see me. And I get it because I come from that. So I get it. And I think that motivates us. Months of awareness are for that. They work, they help people hear about it, they see it. And the more that they see it and the more that they hear about it, the more that it's brought up in day-to-day conversations. And it goes from being this taboo to just talking about mental health and taking care of your mental health and the importance of prioritizing your mental health. So we will continue to have months to recognize, So I think for me, that's a big reason why these months are so important.
So really quickly, Suhailey, one of our, someone in the audience said they can't hear you, but I can hear you. Can everyone else hear Suhailey? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So we'll hopefully there's something going on with Nikisha, but yeah, we're going to go ahead and continue. So who else wants to jump in and talk a little bit more about that?
I can jump in. I think that in a lot of different communities, there's a stigma with mental health. So when you have specialty months, as I like to call them, it promotes the services, but it also provides education. The importance of education, psychology, one of the benefits. Being in the field, I can say that.
1 second, Teanika, it's hard to hear you.
Oh no.
Okay, that was better.
Okay,
yeah, right there.
Got closer. If I'm
Yes.
not close, I'm sorry, guys. I said, for me, the importance of having a specialty month, as I like to call it, is education. When you're providing education to people, you are really promoting the benefits of mental health, especially in our communities. There's so much stigma associated with mental health. By providing education, you will understand and know that mental health is just as important, because if you are not doing well mentally, you are not doing well. So to me, having Mental Health Awareness Month in our communities is so essential in order to really, really progress in this area, because we still have a lot of work to do.
Thank you for that. Go ahead, right on, Divya.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Brittany.
So go ahead, Divya. I just wanted to piggyback off of what Teanika said Teanika and Suhailey in mentioning stigma. I think it's really important that we recognize that by the year 2046, the minority will be the majority in the United States of America. So there are only increasing numbers of Black and brown.
Hold on, Brittany. It's hard to hear you. Oh no! Can you turn your volume up a little bit? I'm so sorry.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, that's better. Mm-hmm.
Let me look. Okay, yeah. What I was saying about the increasing numbers of Black and brown people in this country, and how they're only going to continue to increase. But you have to be clear, the disparities are well documented and stark. Minorities are less likely to receive mental health diagnosis. They have less access to mental health services, and they often receive poor quality of mental health services. And so it's important to spot minority and mental health. One, hopefully speaking mental health services, but also because of the disparities that already exist.
Exactly.
Thank you for that, Brittany. Divya, you wanted to jump in?
Yeah, I wanted to just highlight how I know for some people I've had them say that, wait, isn't the month of May Mental Health Month? I saw all over my Instagram feed that May is all about mental health. Like, how many mental health months are there? But the thing is that this month is so different because it's even in the same with how we do therapy, right? Like, there's therapy, but we also have to do culturally competent therapy and be aware of our clients' identities. And so this month, I think, even reiterates that even more of the importance that mental health is not just this blanket thing. It's not a one size fits all for everybody, but that minoritized people in the United States have so many unique struggles that we have to be really aware of. Like, as a country, like Brittany had said, she had said some of the disparities, how their Black and brown populations are only increasing. But additionally, as clinicians, that we need to be able to tailor our services to all people and to be, and that looks unique. That's not just like this blanket mental health. So yes, Mental Health Month is great. And it's overall just mental health and let's talk about it. But this month is important because we're gonna go a little deeper than that.
Yeah, I definitely think that this month shows everyone that mental health can be tailored to your culture, to your background, to your language. Because I know Suhailey, she does therapy in Spanish as well, right? And so people who are out there watching us right now know that if you want therapy, you can also find therapists of diverse backgrounds, right? If you want to find someone who maybe is either the same gender as you, same sexual orientation as you, race or ethnicity, they're out there. And so you can find them. And I think this month is all about education and awareness, because it gives people the resources that they need. Because sometimes people just don't know where to find things. And especially with the BIPOC community, our lived experiences in this country is just very different. And so our mental health is impacted very differently. And I think that we saw a lot of that during COVID. I definitely saw a rise in racial trauma in a lot of my clients. And so that's why it's so important that we highlight that today, that, you know what, it can be tailored for you. And like you said, Divya, it's not a one size fits all. So with that being said, do you believe that your personal background and identity make access to mental health treatment more difficult? Who wants to jump in with that one and start? Okay, go ahead, Divya.
I would say most definitely. So like I had said, I identify as South Asian, and I'm going to just say, like, I'm speaking from my South Asian perspective. And so for me, I would say the most, what really prevents from treatment and can make treatment a barrier is definitely cultural stigma. A lot of people, at least in my community and even in my family, I've noticed doesn't have as much of the emotional language around mental health. And mental health is even presented very differently. It's like the symptoms are a lot more somaticized, meaning that you feel it physically, right? We can't really always put that I'm feeling this in my mind and I'm feeling anxious or whatever. And so one of the barriers is not even having the language to really identify that, one, it might be something going on psychologically and therapy could be helpful. And another with cultural shame, stigma. I know that for each person, they have like layers that add on to their culture. And I would say, because I'm a daughter of immigrants, so there's also guilt that I've seen in a lot of the children of immigrant, first gen, second gen community of seeking services and having the resources and the access to seek services when maybe the generations before you didn't have as much of that, and thinking about all the struggles they've been through and guilt of like, why do I need therapy? Why would therapy benefit me? So there's guilt, cultural stigma, and then also difficulty with the emotional language.
Okay, Tamika, go ahead.
I just want to add to what Divya said, but as a Black woman, I know being raised and being brought up in America, I was taught, don't let anyone see your emotion, handle it, you'll be fine, you'll get over it. And in mental health, you're taught, no, process those emotions. It's okay to feel that way. It's healthier to actually process instead of pushing it away or pushing it down or pretending like it didn't happen. And I think that mental health is just so important in all communities, but I'm going to say especially in the Black community. I can tell you, watching the George Floyd incident or constant videos every day, I see about 2 or 3 instances of racism. And I can say it hurts and it's hard to see. And to be able to have that conversation with a mental health professional in regards to the impact of my daily life. So that's why I also encourage mental health, especially in my community.
Thank you, Teanika. And Victoria, you wanted to jump in?
Yeah, just to kind of piggy off what already been said, I could just, in terms of kind of speaking from my personal experiences and growing up in a very predominantly Mexican-American neighborhood, definitely kind of piggybacking or like discussing further even the cultural stigmas that I've seen in that community. Very likely, I mean, very much the same as some of the ones that have been discussed in terms of some of the links and some of the views of what therapy means, even knowing that it's accessible. Like therapy was not something we talked about. Emotions were not something we talked about. There was a lot of connections to, oh, it's weak to talk about your feelings, or there's weakness in going and seeking additional services outside of the home. At least within the community I grew up with, it was people wanted to be very private and keep what happened in the home stayed in the home. And there's also, there was a lot of very religious aspects of it. So, if your faith was there, you can kind of pray it away within the Mexican American population. Catholicism is can be very big, not all the time, but in a lot of those households. So there's kind of all these mix of like, be strong, pray it away, do all of this stuff rather than just kind of taking the ownership and going to seek treatment. In addition to that, I think there's a lot of, and you can see about kind of this connection and kind of in terms of, being first or second generation and having to kind of adjust and transition to American system while still keeping your culture at the forefront of who you are. So it's like you're almost balancing these various identities of making sure to kind of hold your culture true, what you were born into, what you're born within, but also balance out the American culture. So at least personally, it's been a lot of like, I'm Mexican on one side, Mexican and Puerto Rican on one side, and American on the other, and it's like finding that dynamic. And I think it's so important to, kind of within therapy to address some of those things, not only the stigmas to break those down for yourself, but also for, your children and their children's children and future generations.
Brittany, it's hard to hear you. I'm so sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
Okay, no, try again.
And so identifying as biracial, there was one side of my family where I had significant access to therapy and was encouraged to go to therapy. And then on the other side of my family, it wasn't talked about as perhaps down. So when you're as reported that Mexican American also American similarly, dealing with
Brittany, is everyone else having a hard time hearing Brittany?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Brittany, is it possible you can go out and maybe come back in? Try that.
Yes.
Oh, see, I heard you just then. I'm so sorry, guys. We really want to hear you. You have some really good things that you're saying. And so let's hope that we could get Brittany back and we can definitely hear her. Anyone else wants to jump in on that question?
I can add to that. I mean, it was something that Dr. Rodriguez had mentioned in terms of like praying it away, because I hear it so often, and I always want to emphasize that therapy doesn't replace your God or your religion or your higher power or any other support systems or resources that you have. It's just an addition, and coming, being a Latina, coming from a Dominican household, it did play a role, because we were raised to have these specific attitudes and beliefs towards mental health and mental illness and treatment, that even in our own community, we have biases and we have negative assumptions when an individual goes to therapy, when really they're just trying to better themselves, right? And growing up, that was what would always play in my mind. And the fact that we have those negative assumptions, we hesitate to take those same steps with the fear that others are going to judge us the same way that we judge, people in our family or in our community. I'm an adult now, right? And I'm a therapist now, so I know better. And I can still, as an adult and as a therapist, sense that hesitation or pause when I get asked what I do for a living, because oftentimes it gets inaccurately minimized to working with crazy people, right? Yo trabajo con lo loco. I work with the crazy people. So we continue to educate, we continue to spread, more positive and realistic messages to try to continue normalizing it, but it's still something I experience to this day when I get asked that question, because I kind of know what's coming, but I don't want that to stop me from continuing to educate, because I think that's necessary.
Thank you.
I just want to add very quickly. I want to say, before being really educated on the benefits of mental health, I can say before it's like, oh, you see a therapist, is everything okay with wrong? Today, being educated, I'm like, you don't see a therapist? You don't have that support? I'm sorry, do you
right?
have resources? So
and I'm glad
a different perspective.
It really is, because it's more about support. And I think that a lot of people in our community sometimes don't realize that is something that you can have. That's a type of support that you can have, right? And so I always tell people, I don't give advice. That's not what I do, right? Like I help people process the things in their life. Like sometimes it's their behaviors, right? They want to figure out, well, why do I act this way, right? Or why is it hard for me to maintain a relationship? And we really kind of process and talk through that. But I know as a Black woman, I know that there is big distrust of the healthcare system and my with the with people who are Black. So I noticed that growing up. And I also noticed that sometimes there was a limited amount of culturally diverse providers, right? So when people sometimes think of going to therapy, they think that automatically they're going to have a white therapist. And so that's why I think it's so important for women like us to be on a panel to say, no, we're therapists, right? So you can find a therapist who, you know, might have the same cultural identity that you have. It won't be as big of a problem as you think it is. And I think also our background, a lot of us are underinsured. Some of us are uninsured, right? So that's also a barrier to treatment for a lot of people. So there are a lot of barriers out there, but I think that the more education that's out there, the less barriers there will be. So hopefully we can get Brittany back. But the next question is, what has it been like to be a therapist with marginalized identities during COVID-19, as well as time of civil unrest due to racial injustice? And like, what impact has it had on your clients? And who wants to jump in with that question? Because it's been a long road these last 18, 19 months of being the therapist in a pandemic.
Can I say that people are not even able to actually verbalize the pandemic and the impact it has had on them?
Mm-hmm.
They're like, you know, it's just a change in my work schedule. Now I'm working from home. What really is, the pandemic is a crisis that has impacted the whole entire world and country, and it's forced you to isolate. It's forcing you to essentially sit home and think about things that you're not easily able to distract from, right? Also, people have lost people due to the pandemic. So it's processing that and learning how to process it. And can I say also from the social justice perspective, while George Floyd and the civil unrest was more publicized, I've seen that since I was a kid, Brittany King and so many different names that it would take forever to name, but to actually, again, being able to sit with a mental health professional and know that not only am I not alone because I can relate to you and you can relate to me, but being able to verbalize it.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I think. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, for me, especially this past year, it's been so intense. Personally, but working with clients when we're talking about the racial injustice, and it's everywhere. It's always been the case, but I think now a lot of people are, you know, you can't ignore it anymore, you know, or people are choosing not to ignore it. So I've seen how it's impacted a lot of my clients, maybe in different ways, but the impact was there. And as a woman of color, it's impacted me. The magnitude that I see in my clients of how they express feeling targeted or feeling ignored or dismissed, it was so clear that as a therapist, you know, we need to provide that space. So I would encourage other minorities or other people of color to join this profession so clients can feel that they have more affirming spaces, especially now. It's so important. Being able to teach your clients or provide them with education on how to advocate for themselves, social advocacy as well, opening up healing discussions, you know, kind of like what we're doing here, but providing that space in you know, confidential, safe, comfortable, therapeutic setting as well. And for some of my clients, learning how to be better allies. You know, that's a conversation that I haven't had with many of my clients that are white, right? Like, this is something that it's making me uncomfortable. I don't know what to do with it. What can I do to help? You know, and not so much that they feel guilty, but also you know, if there is a privilege, how can I take the next step? And it's been amazing to see that. And it's also been a new experience, right? Because that's not something that is, like, that's not a curriculum in school of working with the white client.
Right.
It's working with a client of color or a minority, you know? So that's been my experience.
Just think to piggy off that. I mean, first off, yes, it's been a wild ride and we're still kind of on it. We're still on that train. So I think right with that, I think it's really important to acknowledge that, like, everybody's, as you know, individuals have mentioned, it's already been discussed, that everyone's kind of, everyone's journey has been different in the past year and a half plus. It just keeps going in terms of like what their experiences are. Do they have the articulation to kind of really put words to their feelings around those experiences? Are they still kind of figuring out those experiences from the pandemic to dealing with like social injustice and all those things around their identity? I do think it's been a hard time for many, but I do think it's also been a period of reflection that's allowed people to kind of introspect and kind of review their identities and kind of look at things a little bit different than maybe they haven't before on all sides of the coin. I think, at least personally, even for me, and like what I've seen in some of my clients, it's kind of been like this awakening in terms of like, what is your true identity, especially as a woman of color, as a person of color, BIPOC person of color in America, and what does that mean for you? And kind of starting those conversations. And I think there's still going to be a long journey ahead of like having those conversations in the room, outside of the room, and just kind of bridging the gap of like, how can we kind of, you know, all come together to continue to have these discussions, to not only, I mean, if we're, you know, help our clients, but also kind of take it outside and just be, you know, build people up to be the greatest versions of themselves and feel secure in their identity as you know, as BIPOC, as women of color, as these, you know, kind of trying to make their way in America, and really just kind of understanding that what it means and what the impact it is on their mental health. And hopefully we will see more therapists of color coming out of this journey, because there's a kind of a new emphasis. And again, I like to use the word awakening because that's kind of what I've experienced in some ways in terms of my own identity, and just to kind of really get out there and see what the need is and really connect people. I think now we're at the forefront with all of this kind of, I don't want to say mess, it's a good mess sometimes greatness can come out of messes, right? And so we're at this forefront where I think it can really unfold to bring us into this new, you know, light of just where people are kind of more culturally competent, can have those conversations, and that they're not scared or hesitant to go to therapy in a way.
I think a way to what I've been thinking of as we've all been speaking is, first of all, as a therapist, we've all said it, that it's been a rough one. It's been a lot to manage, because we're managing not only our own feelings about everything, which is inevitably just a lot, especially as BIPOC clinicians, but then also the feelings that our clients are having, and then navigating both of those, and how, where the spaces are for that. I think another thing that's been for me as a clinician, noticing and being outside of the context of in the room, is even in like family conversations. I've been seeing that has increased. I think even with the knowledge that, you know, I and all of you have with mental health and the importance of it in the BIPOC community, it's like a way to communicate with our families about it. Like, it's a way that you see something in the news, and then you can talk to family about it. I think for me, ways that I've noticed that having conversations around mental health, it's been helpful to have them very like concrete, like seeing it in the news and being like, look at this, like, here's an example, and let's talk about the mental health behind it, versus like more abstract conversations. At least to me, I found that to be helpful in my community. And so as a therapist, I think that that's been helpful to have some of, one, the knowledge that we learned through our multicultural training, through our social justice training, also what I'm learning through seeing experiences with my clients, and then also my own personal reflection, and bringing those into conversations, even in context of my community. So I've noticed that too, and I've been I don't know, it's just been an interesting
you guys
process.
really brought up that it's been a wild ride, and it really has. I think that this is one of the first times that as a therapist, you are in some ways going through the same thing as your client, right? So I remember days when my clients would be like, "Are you okay, Ednesha?" Right? And I appreciate it, but I also realize that I'm there to hold space for you, but they wanted to hold space for me. I think especially around all of the civil unrest as a Black woman. And so I know that I also felt a little bit of guilt because there was times that I didn't want to work, like because I was sad. Like that I was really impacted by all of the videos that I was seeing, by the protests. And there were days where I didn't know if I could hold space for someone else because I could barely hold space for myself. And so when you have a job where your job is to be there for others and support them, it could get very difficult when you're going through something like a pandemic. And so I want people to know that are watching is that most therapists have therapists. So I was going to therapy on a weekly basis because I know it was something that I needed so I could be able to show up for my clients. And so I did definitely see an increase in anxiety in a lot of my clients. And I have clients right now who are not sure if they want to go back to work. Like they're not really in a place where they feel comfortable being around people. I mean, I know that a lot of people are vaccinated, but a lot of people are not. I hear a lot of talk of post-COVID. It's really not post-COVID. We're still in COVID. So people are still struggling with feeling safe and what it means to feel safe. And so some of us are back in the office. I go back to the office once a week, but people are still afraid to come in. But they want to be there, but they're still very afraid. So, being a part of a marginalized community, I've noticed that I've been pushing people to therapy. And I hate to say it, but therapy is trending. When you look on social media, right, like people are talking about it openly. They're talking about it on TikTok. They're talking about it on Instagram and on Facebook. People are saying, oh, my therapist said, and they feel good about it, right? So I think that the stigma that we've seen is still present, but I think the need is so great that people are putting aside that stigma and saying, the heck with it. I need somebody to talk to. And they're reaching out more and more. And I think that shows in our caseloads, all of the people that have been coming to therapy that may have never been to therapy before. I'm pretty sure a lot of you women hear people say, this is my first time. I don't really know what to do. I don't really know what to say, but I'm here. Because I think that they realize that there's a lot of healing that needs to be done. There's personal healing. Our country is healing. And so we've been right at the forefront. And I'm excited to say that I've been here through it all and that we all made it because we are still doing sessions every day. So we're still here and we made it. So I know someone brought up, I think it was you, Divya, that brought up cultural competence and why it's important in our work. I think that it's very important. So if you could talk a little bit about what cultural competence is, and you guys can also jump in and why it's so important in our work.
Sure. So cultural competence is, I look at it as not something that is separate from therapy. I've sometimes seen it viewed as like, oh, you're a therapist, but you should be culturally competent here and there. And like, it's like, no, therapy is being culturally competent, because cultural competence is being able to look at your client as who they are in the world. Like, how does America see them, right? Like based on their identities, based on their race, their ethnicity, their sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, religious orientation, like how are they viewed in the world and what makes them who they are. And also cultural competence is understanding that your identities may be separate than your client's identities, and noticing that your mental health and your experiences might be different than theirs, and taking account into that, because taking account into those different factors and their different identities is also extremely validating. Otherwise, we might be viewing our clients incorrectly. So it's important to be able to account for all of what makes them who they are.
I also think it's important for us to be curious, right? Because I have a lot of clients who racial and ethnic background is different from mine. And so there might be things that I don't know about their experience. So I just ask. I don't assume. I think that's a huge part of the work that we do, that we can't assume someone's experiences just because we may have read something in a book, right? Because I know a lot of us, in school, they would say, oh, this population is this and treat this population this way. And it feels very unfair. I think I read a book before that said that African-American clients were difficult. And they put that in a book, right? And that's very hurtful, because now I'm not looking at the person for who they are, I'm looking at it, you know, in the way that someone else has described it, right? So I think it's so important. A part of cultural competence is to get to know our clients and understand the intersectionality of their race and their gender and their sexual orientation and how it impacts them and not how we think it impacts them.
Just to add to that, I think a big piece of that, Ednesha, is also you don't want to generalize and you don't want to minimize. You don't want to generalize and make an assumption that because of what you read or what you studied or what you heard, this is the experience for every person of color, every minority, just using that population as an example. But you also don't want to minimize if that has been their experience, you know. So one component is knowledge of your client's culture, and that can be difficult, especially when you work with such a diverse population. So knowledge in combination with cultural openness, I think, and individual differences within different groups, being sensitive to the needs of others, the needs of your clients or your patients, being knowledgeable and skilled in doing multicultural assessment or interventions, and to do that, to provide that quality of care. And oftentimes to do that and to do it ethically and properly, we have to look inside ourselves. Can I provide adequate treatment to any client? You have to dig deep, and you have to further explore your own racial experiences and how they've affected you in any way, if they have. What are your beliefs? What are your views? What are your values? Any biases, any stereotypes, assumptions. Like even with my students, when they're doing practicum and they're doing their internship, I always say, check yourself, right? What are any opinions or assumptions or beliefs that you may have on that client, and check it before you enter the room, so that it doesn't seep into that session in a negative way. Because like you said, Ednesha, this is a space for them, right? And you want to make sure that these assumptions or biases or stereotypes that you have, they may not be beneficial to bring into a session. So you want to avoid harm. And part of that is doing the work yourself or seeing your own therapist.
I just want to add about self-awareness. As Suhailey was saying, being self-aware is so important. And I can say, as a Black woman, every Black woman does not have my experience, right? So I think also.
Hold on, Teanika, start again because it was hard to hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now? I think I'm gonna have to get closer.
Okay, sorry. Yes.
No problem.
It's the virtual world, guys. We are doing the best we can. That's all I have to say. I can't wait till we're all in person again. So go ahead.
I will say it louder. So what I was saying was self-awareness. I think that's just so essential. And I'm going to say, even as a Black woman, cultural competency to me is not assuming that every Black woman has the same experience that I do, right? I was raised in Brooklyn, all right? So that's going to be a different experience than someone raised in Alabama. So it's being mindful of that, and not assuming just because you're of the same culture that you know their culture and have that same experience. So checking yourself and self-awareness with cultural competency, not thinking you're an expert on that person's life based on their culture and the fact that you are the same race or of the same culture.
Thank you for that. I think that this is really important, that people realize that what we do is not easy, right? There is a lot of self-reflection that we do day in and day out when we walk into a room or when we get on a video with a person, trying to understand them and being open and honest about any biases that we may have walking in the room. And so for everyone who is watching today, every therapist has a supervisor, right? So there is a space that we talk about this with another therapist, so we can really be able to check our thoughts and our feelings and some of our behaviors at the door, so we can be the best therapist that we can for our clients. So it is a process that we go through, and we don't do it alone, because I think that we all have biases, right? We just have to understand what they are and figure out how it's impacting our clients. So I appreciate you guys really kind of honing in on that, because that's really important. So I think that it's really important for us to, since we have all of these people watching, when do you think that someone should start thinking about going to therapy? Like, what kind of things could be coming up in their lives when maybe they should say, a therapist could be helpful?
What I would say is I'm struggling with is a good indication that therapy would be helpful. I'm struggling with my confidence right now.
Okay.
Therapy would be helpful with that, because you're discovering yourself and you're asking yourself questions. And in therapy, you and your therapist are on a journey together to discover that, to ask questions, to process them, to discover things. So to me, I say therapy, but to me, it's really a journey. You're on a journey of self-discovery with the support with your therapist.
I agree. Just to piggy off that, I think it is kind of no time like the present, right? I think if there's any inclination that, it might be help to kind of, we just spoke about self-awareness, right? Therapy is a great place to kind of really just, even if you don't necessarily even taking it back, you don't have to be in crisis to go to therapy.
Yes.
You feel like you just need some growth, that you want to learn more about yourself, that you want to gain a better self-awareness, that maybe you do see something, if something feels off with confidence or other areas in your life, therapy is the perfect kind of space to kind of open up about those things in a different way with someone who, ideally should be unbiased and just be there for you. So back to the culture of confidence, it's important to find a therapist who kind of can meet you where you're at with that. And just kind of build on that self-awareness and kind of go on your journey in that direction with that.
Okay, jump in, Divya.
I think that any time is a good time to start therapy. And the reason behind that is because we're all human. We're all imperfect. We all got stuff going on. Like, that's just part of being human. And there are resources. There are ways that we don't have to be struggling. And there are ways that we can cope and we can talk to a trained professional. And so there are many reasons that people can go to therapy and they could find some benefit in it. One thing that I do want to highlight for people who are maybe looking into therapy is a struggle that I've seen with a lot of people, especially in the BIPOC community, who might be trying therapy for the first time. And already, as Ednesha, we talked about, that there might be some distrust for the healthcare system, and then you go to a therapist and it might not be the best experience. And then it's like, I'm done. I can't do therapy. And I've had a lot of people in the community actually have experiences like that. I've encouraged people to make a few consultations, talk to a few therapists, because the fit between you and your therapist, it's just like with your friends, right? You have to feel like a connection with them, and then you can grow deeper. The research shows that the biggest indicator of successful treatment is a strong therapeutic alliance between the client and the therapist. So to people who might be looking for a therapist, I encourage you, if you try a therapist and it might not be the best experience, that's normal, that you don't love the experience with your first therapist. It's okay if that happens, that there are more options and you can still find therapy to be beneficial.
Right, because it's still a relationship at the end of it. It's a professional relationship. It may not be the most organic in terms of it not being as two-sided as it would be maybe, outside of that therapeutic room, but it's a relationship. And especially knowing that there's already that hesitation, being able to really see your client and acknowledge the strength that it took for them to even make that consultation, or even just call, or even send an email, just that stepping stone is it's a big deal. Understanding the barriers that they face. So I agree, there's never a wrong time to get involved in therapy, because we all need a safe space, an affirming space where we can work on ourselves. Maybe more obvious reasons to seek therapy, or the assumption when you're in crisis, of course, or when there are certain concerns that maybe are starting to get in the way of how you operate or function in a social setting, in an occupational setting, at work, school, home, interpersonal relationships. I'm always extra mindful and aware when there's a pattern of like somatic symptoms, right? Especially culturally, that tends to be something that you go to your doctor for, so I'm that person in your circle. This is your 10th headache in a month. See your therapist because the Advil is not working. So there's something going on. And for other people, again, a headache is just a headache, but sometimes it can be indicative of something else. So just pay attention, because your body has a way of communicating things to you.
Yeah, I think about sometimes when it's hard for you to regulate your emotions, maybe it's time to see a therapist, right? If you have been thinking about suicide or death, right? Like those type of things, go see a therapist. But for me, I'm a lifer. I think I'll be in therapy for the rest of my life. And that's just because I realize that every day brings a new experience, and I'm going to need to talk about it and process it. And I know that I have this safe space to do it. So for people who are saying, I'm not sure if it's for me or if it's not, you never know until you try. So all we're saying is like, listen, make the call, send the email, at least try. And you might, like the first therapist you get may not be the right fit. And I think that I'm glad you guys brought that up. You may not have the right fit all the time. I have people who come to me and say, well, have you been to therapy? I went for 2 sessions, it didn't work out. Well, what do you mean it didn't work out? Like, did you give it a chance to work out? And so I guess what we're also saying is give it a chance, give it some time. Because like you guys talked about, it's a relationship. And we know that sometimes when we go on a first date with someone, it's not always not that great. So maybe the second or the third date, you're like, oh, okay, this could be a good fit for me. I should keep going. It's the same thing with therapy. You cannot give us 1 session, guys, or 2. You got to give us a little bit more time to figure out if we're a good fit for you. And so I think some of us have talked about it, but we really want to make therapy and mental health the same as physical health, right? The same way that we go get a physical every year, you should be seeing a therapist for some check-in sessions, right? Like every year, just want to check out how my mental health is going, right? Let me do 2, 3, 4, 5 sessions with a therapist to make sure that, you know what, I'm in a good place. The same way that we do every year with our general doctor. So I think that that's kind of where we want to go with this education, that we want to make it just as important, because it is, you know, and we can never forget that. So I wanted to make sure we had a couple minutes for anyone who had any questions. But before we get to questions, I just want to know if you ladies have any resources for the people who have been listening.
I mean, on Instagram, because I'm on Instagram and I'm always following different people. There's a page that I follow. It's called what is it called? Melanin and Mental Health. Mm-hmm. And I always like to check their page, because they have like additional resources and discussions, and they also kind of help link minorities or people of color to other clinicians of people of color. Mm-hmm. And aside from BeWELL Psychotherapy, you can always use websites like Psychology Today, or I found therapists on ZocDoc. You know,
we're everywhere.
Yeah, everywhere. And it helps when you can learn a little bit about your therapist before you can see them, right? Kind of like how we have on the BeWELL website, you have our picture, you get to know us a little bit, so we don't feel as distant while you're doing virtual therapy with them.
Anyone else have any other resources? Okay, Tamika.
I actually learned that you can go to your insurance company's website and you can filter out exactly what you're looking for. So you can filter out by race, you can filter out by gender, just simply by going to your insurance website. And it provides you with their insurance, and then you can filter out. And can I say another great benefit of technology is you don't have to go into the
Wait, hold on. Say it one more time, Tamika.
I said the great benefit about technology today is you don't always have to go into the therapist's office, right?
Yes.
Remote sessions via telephone, video are accessible as well.
We've been doing it for the last year and a half. We've been on video and telephone, guys. We have not been seeing people face to face. And Victoria, did you have any resources?
Yeah, no, I mean, some of the same ones that were already mentioned, but there's a lot of like specific websites. Like I think there's one called Inclusive Therapist. So just kind of different sites to find potential therapists that are, you know, BIPOC, and those resources kind of are there just to kind of filter the search down, if you will. I do think like ZocDoc and Psychology Today are great too, because they do have options, even if maybe you don't have insurance or need a sliding scale. I think there's options on there to kind of filter by that as well. So it is good. I agree with like Suhailey as well, just kind of researching your therapist, and if there is like a platform to kind of learn a little bit about them, or even on the website of their where they work, like BeWELL, just to kind of read a little bit and see if they might be a good fit for at least a consultation.
Yeah, and a really good site is NAMI, which is National Association of Mental Illness. And so they have a lot of just information just so you can educate yourself maybe on some signs and symptoms and also help you to get a therapist. And actually, New York City has a 24/7 hotline. I think it's 888 WELL. And so if you get on there, and I'll get the exact one, I think that I'm sorry, guys, I totally forgot. But New York City does have 24/7 therapists. So if you call at any time, there will be someone that you can talk to. So that is available. And all of these ladies are accepting clients, and they can be found at BeWELLPsychotherapy.com. So if anyone here is watching and is interested in doing a consultation, you can check any of these ladies out, and they'll make some room in their schedule for you. And we'll take any questions if you guys have some. So we'll wait a couple of minutes to see if anyone has any questions. And is there anything that you want to add? Yeah. Okay.
Oh, yeah. I just was going to say, I have a few resources. I'm going to type them in the chat box. I have them all typed up, but there's some really great ones. Inclusive Therapists, which Dr. Rodriguez talked about. There are also really great blog posts on there. And then there are other therapy directories, and then just other pages for community mental health for BIPOC.
And thank you for that, Teanika. It's AAA NYC WELL.
Yeah.
So that is really good. And then Therapy for Black Girls. Zen Care is another place that you can find therapists on there. Melanin and Mental Health actually has a directory as well. And they also have a podcast. We have a podcast. It's called Be Real, and we talk about mental health. I am actually on another podcast, which is Black Woman Be Whole. And so we talk a bit about mental health on there as well. So there's a couple of places you guys can go if you want to, just think about your mental health a little bit more, or get a little bit of education, or actually find a therapist. Mm-hmm. So I guess since we haven't had anyone ask a question, do you guys want to end with anything before we go?
I just look forward if someone wants to want me to be a part of their journey. I look forward to being on a journey of mental wellness, right? Just be making positive transitions or working through any issues or concerns you may have. It is a journey, and having that support is essential.
Thank you so much for that, Teanika.
Just to add to that, I think you're right. It is a journey, and I think just to kind of point out that it might be uncomfortable on that journey sometimes, but to look at it as like you are taking ownership and investing in your mental health. And that's something that's just as important as, Nisha was saying in terms of investing in your physical health. So just kind of making the move, you to kind of decide to do that investment, give yourself a pat on the back, because that's a big step.
Thank you. It's definitely the best investment that you could ever make. Every time I've dated a guy and he's like, why do you go to therapy? Because it's the best investment I can ever make into myself. And I think that whole stigma of you have to be crazy. And everybody's like, well, you're not crazy. No, I'm not crazy at all. At all. It's not about that. It's just that I know that I have a safe space where I can talk about the things that I have going on in my life. And that's the beauty of it. What you don't realize is it's 45 minutes or an hour just about you. Who wouldn't want that? Who wouldn't want time to just talk about themselves and process all of their stuff? The great thing about friendships is friends are always there for you, but you kind of got to go back and forth, right? You got to hear their stuff. They got to hear your stuff. It's more of a balance. Therapy is all about you. It's a wonderful experience for anyone who has not experienced it before.
So for anyone who is watching this and has been contemplating, should I see a therapist? What's the point? Hopefully this serves as a message, like, see a therapist if you're thinking about it, if you're contemplating. What do you have to lose? It's a relationship. You can start. If it's not a good fit, it doesn't have to be permanent, right? This doesn't have to be kind of like the end all be all. You can try another therapist. You can take some time to reflect and give it another try, right? And you may be pleasantly surprised because, who's not going to want a space where it's about you? For some people, that's uncomfortable, but it's a learning experience, right? And it can demonstrate, what a healthy, positive relationship can look like for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. Just like any other relationship, if it doesn't work, you can break up with me.
That's right.
I've had clients ghost me. It happens. It happens in these relationships too. But yeah, at least start it. And then you can figure out if it's right for you. So I just want to say thank you to everyone that, first, everyone on the panel. Thank you guys for your time. Thank you guys for all of the work that you do day in and day out, helping people on their journey to healing. And thank you for everyone that logged in tonight. So thank you so much, guys. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.